we're going to bring on James Oliviero. I believe I pronounced it correct. If not, John Vandermosten will correct me. The biotech analyst from Zacks. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael, and glad to be back. And yes, today we're going to have James Oliviero, and he's the CEO of Checkpoint Therapeutics. He's held some executive positions in the past and also was an investment banker. And James, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hey,
Great.
John.
Can you give us just a little background on yourself?
Sure, absolutely. And first off, thanks for having me on the program today.
You're welcome.
So I have a background of nearly 20 years of working in biotechnology. Last, I worked with Carix Biopharmaceuticals, where I spent about 10 years there in the executive leadership team, ultimately bringing a new drug to market, a drug called Auryxia that was approved by the FDA and EMA under our watch. And then we ultimately built a commercial team and launched it, and it's being sold now in the U.S. as we speak.
And stock symbol?
For Carix, KERX.
And Checkpoint Therapeutics?
Yep, and now I'm CEO of Checkpoint, trying to do it again, and that's CKPT.
All right. Well, great. Well, let's kick off with some questions about the company. You guys have a pretty broad portfolio, 6 candidates there. What can you tell us about your lead candidates?
Yep, so our lead candidate is called CK301. That's an anti-PD-L1 that we're developing for non-small cell lung cancer and certain other solid tumors. This is a drug within the class of immuno-oncology or checkpoint inhibitors, which I'm sure many of the listeners have heard a lot about. Immuno-oncology is really the new wave of medicines being developed to improve upon chemotherapies that have the harsh side effects, and then targeted therapies that typically don't work for very long. Immuno-oncology is engaging the immune system to fight the tumor, obviously a much more natural way to fight the tumor. And our PD-L1 has properties that are similar to other FDA-approved agents in the similar class, so we're excited to bring this forward in clinical trials as we speak and hopefully bring it to market soon. And then we also have a targeted therapy called CK101, which is also in clinical trials as we speak, and that's called an EGFR inhibitor, also for non-small cell lung cancer.
Sounds exciting. And so we've talked about checkpoint inhibitors on the show before, so some of our listeners may be familiar with that. It's a pretty big market. And how big is it, and how much of it do you think you can take?
Yeah, it's a huge, huge market. So Cowen and Company actually does some great research where they come out with potential dollars that are going to be sold annually in this market, and they're predicting it's going to be selling as a class $50 billion. That's just the PD-1, PD-L1 class that we're developing now, to sell $50 billion each and every year in 2024. The class right now is selling $10 billion annually, so clearly a huge market opportunity.
And there have been some other PD-L1 checkpoint inhibitors that have already gone through the approval process, such as Tecentriq and Bavencio. Does this make it any easier for you to go through the process?
Absolutely. This is where not being first to market is actually a benefit for us. So we have the luxury of being able to see where this class of checkpoint inhibitors has worked and has not worked. And that allows us to design clinical trials that we believe have a very high probability of success. And also we have the luxury of the FDA understanding the safety profile of this class of agent, having seen multiple of this class come through. So I think it does really expedite our clinical development plan for this agent so we can get to the market as quickly as possible.
And you guys have a strategy to develop the product as a follow-on to other leaders in the space. Can you share that with us?
Yep. So we want to be in the phase 3 registration program the beginning of 2019, so the beginning of next year, and that's a very realistic goal for us. And that's a study that we believe that we can run and have data out in, call it, early 2021. And this is a study where another drug, Keytruda, has succeeded, and we want to get a piece of the, call it, $10 billion portion of the lung market that they're now selling into. So how we're going to compete with a drug like Keytruda from Merck is really on price. They're charging an enormous price for their immuno-oncology drug, about $165,000 annually per patient per year. And obviously their margins are through the roof at that price. We are going to come in essentially at half that price, and we'll have margins that are plenty good for a company our size that are going to create plenty of profits. And we also view that as part of the solution to what's going on with the pricing in the industry these days. You don't need the price that high, and we certainly want to be part of that solution.
Sounds like it's all several issues at once going through there.
Absolutely.
So another thing that makes it so attractive is that we've seen a lot of transactions go on in checkpoint inhibitors. Any deals out there that are particularly relevant for Checkpoint Therapeutics?
Yeah, absolutely. So last year there were a couple of deals that were very relevant for us, and what we're seeing are those big pharmaceutical companies and large cap biotech that have lots of cash and want to be in oncology and therefore have a piece of this PD-1, PD-L1 class, this immuno-oncology class. What they're doing is they buy a drug that's in clinical trials that they can afford and then develop. And there's been recent deals, for example, Incyte Macrogenics, where Incyte paid $150 million in cash up front, among other milestones and royalties, and $150 million up front for a drug that's essentially a month ahead of where our drug is. That's 50% higher than our market cap today. We're at a $100 million market cap. So that really sets a value of what we've created here with just this one product. And then if you hold on to the drug a little bit longer, there's deals such as Celgene, BeiGene, where BeiGene was about a year from now in terms of where our product is. They received $500 million in cash up front and then additional milestones and royalties. So again, very, very valuable class of agent that we're developing.
James, it's Michael Yorba. I'm going to have to close the segment for now, but you're going to be back after the break with more with John Vandermosten, right?
Yes, I'll be here.
All right, James Oliviero, Checkpoint Therapeutics, symbol CKPT, and John Vandermosten from Zacks. This segment has been brought to you by Zacks. Thanks for listening to CEO Money. We'll be right back with more after this message. Welcome back to CEO Money. I'm Michael Yorba. I'm in studio with John Vandermosten of Zacks and his guest, James Oliviero, Checkpoint Therapeutics, symbol CKPT. John, you're about to ask James a series of more driving questions. Please, let me back up and go for it.
Certainly. Well, the next thing that I was hoping James could help us with is just the lung cancer space. So the company is working on a EGFR inhibitor for non-small cell lung cancer. And probably as many people know, lung cancer is the second most important cancer out there. It affects about 230,000 people a year. And then non-small cell is probably the biggest portion of that. So James, I just want to ask you, how big can the market be for your EGFR inhibitor?
Sure. So, the second drug we're developing, the EGFR inhibitor for non-small cell lung cancer, EGFR mutant non-small cell lung cancer is a subset of all non-small cell lung cancer, and approximately 40,000 patients each and every year are diagnosed with EGFR mutant non-small cell lung cancer in the major markets. That's the U.S., Europe, and Japan. And that equates to about a $5 billion market opportunity. And so CK101, this other drug that we're developing in clinical trials as we speak, is specifically designed to shrink tumors that have mutations in EGFR in non-small cell lung cancer patients.
Okay, and there are some other EGFR inhibitors out there, a couple of names, Tarceva and Iressa. What makes CK101 different?
Yep. So Tarceva and Iressa are called first-generation EGFR inhibitors, and they shrink tumors very well that have EGFR mutations. However, tumors are smart, and they've learned to form resistance through a resistance mutation, an additional mutation in EGFR, so that Tarceva and Iressa no longer work after about 10 months of therapy. What we're developing is called a third-generation EGFR inhibitor, and this type of drug inhibits tumors that have the initial mutations, the same as Tarceva and Iressa, but also inhibit tumors that have the resistance mutation. And what you see then is a much longer duration of response in the orders of about double the response duration as Tarceva and Iressa.
Okay. And in our research, we've seen that EGFR mutations are more common in Asia. Does that mean these overseas market might be attractive for you?
Absolutely. Overseas as well as the U.S. Again, there's 40,000 patients each and every year worldwide. And again, it's a $5 billion market worldwide. So whether you look at Europe, Asia, or in the U.S. in non-small cell lung cancer, there's plenty of patients and a substantial market opportunity to market this drug in each and every one of them.
That sounds exciting. And another big theme in biotech is combination therapy. One of the things that I've liked about your portfolio is that you have multiple candidates that could be part of this combination therapy, and the two lead candidates that we're speaking about, the checkpoint inhibitor and also the EGFR inhibitor, looks like they could be used together. Probably is that the case?
Absolutely. We certainly want to be trying using them both together to enhance the response rate as well as the duration of response by combining a targeted therapy that has a high response rate with an immuno-oncology drug such as a PD-L1 that has a very long durability of response. So combination therapy in oncology is really where oncology therapies are going next. There's a lot of work in combination therapies, and that's why we have a portfolio of 6 agents we're developing, all with interesting and diverse mechanisms of action where we want to try combining each and every one of them with our anti-PD-L1 in order to augment the activity and really differentiate from the competition. And that's really going to be the strategy of the company after bringing our PD-L1 on the market, is to concentrate on the combinations. And then by having each of the assets of a combination within our same portfolio, that really gives us pricing leverage on the competition. We're able to leverage the margins on both compounds and then really be aggressively lower on pricing, essentially charging full price for one and giving the other one away for free, and having a big impact on the pricing that's out there for these combination agents.
And how do combination agents help or synergize, I guess? How do they work together to really attack the cancer?
Yeah, so as a monotherapy, so giving an anti-PD-L1 on its own, typically patients, only about 20 to 25% of patients actually respond to the PD-L1. And when they respond for years, which is great, but only a minority do respond. And the reason is that often in many cases, the T cells, so your immune system, isn't recognizing the cancer. And anti-PD-L1 works when the T cells do recognize the cancer and the cancer turns off the immune system. And anti-PD-L1 will turn your immune system essentially back on. But if the T cells don't recognize the tumor from the get-go, an anti-PD-L1 won't be very helpful. So by hitting the tumor with a targeted agent, such as our EGFR inhibitor, the tumor releases antigens, and that heats up the tumor. It's called a hot tumor now. And that brings in the T cells, and then that's when the PD-L1, the anti-PD-L1, will be beneficial. So the combination is really a synergy between the two.
Well, thank you for the detailed description. And then just one last question on CK101 and 301. When might we see these in a registrational trial?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
When might we see these in a phase 3 registrational trial?
Absolutely. So 2018 is about generating clinical data and issuing press releases with that clinical data to really put us on the map with investors. 2019 is all about starting the pivotal registration program. So the anti-PD-L1 registration program in non-small cell lung cancer is expected to start in the first quarter of 2019. And we would also like to have a phase 3 going with our EGFR inhibitor also in 2019. And then also at the same time in parallel, start the combination work of the two together.
James, thanks for being a guest on the show. I know that we're going to have more on this topic on the front page of our homepage with the write-up that John Vandermosten is doing on this, aside from the archive. I want to thank you for being a guest on the show.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
Thank you, James.
James Oliviero with Checkpoint Therapeutics, symbol CKPT, and John Vandermosten, biotech analyst with Zacks. That's scr.zacks.com. You can get a podcast, and then John's going to post an article about his research report about what's going on with Checkpoint Therapeutics.